Hey YouTube, I normally do videos on like web stuff, whatever, but I'm taking a different side here and doing a completely different video. I wanted to express something I seen on a show on Animal Planet. It's called Infestation. And there's a reason why I titled this video the way I did, because it's going to correlate here pretty soon. But basically what happened in what happens in the show is just they show people who have some sort of infestations in their homes or businesses or whatever. Could be spider infestations, ants, or cockroaches, something like that. This particular episode that I'm referring to, which I will have on the link below, is about infestation of rats. And there was this lady who had a rat problem. She didn't know it though at first. She caught a rat, I think in her garage or something. And so, kind of thought, her problems are gone. Just caught a rat and whatever. But she later discovered there's more than just one. And she called the exterminator, and the exterminator was pretty surprised because there was about, maybe 50, 60 rats. I don't know. It was a lot. And of course, she was very surprised. She had a rat infestation because she's a very probably clean woman. Probably doesn't have any food or anything like that. But she also noticed that obviously the rats are there for a reason. They're the food source or whatever. And so she noticed there was a lot of nuts on the ground. The nuts that you eat. And so I wonder, where the heck did this come from, sort of thing. So anyway, the exterminator set some traps out, and she would check them every now and then. And she, caught most of the rats, and that was it. Of course, some of them survived. And so, some time had passed and kind of thought her problems were over. Traps did their work. And then she would hear sounds in her walls, and underneath the floor. And I guess what happened was the mouse had chewed their way through the floorboards, and she can start hearing rats in her house, or at least in between her walls. And so she knew she still had a problem with rats. And so, get back to the nuts now. She went outside. I don't know if it was when this was. Could have been a day later. I don't know. But she went outside eventually, and she seen her neighbor, and her neighbor had a tall fence. And on the fence were some squirrels, and they were chewing on some nuts. It's like, this is kind of interesting. So she walks over to the fence, and she overlooks the fence and sees her neighbor, and her neighbor's feeding squirrels some nuts. So she asked very, I guess I would imagine very politely, telling the neighbor, look, I have a problem with mice, obviously referring to the nuts, talking about how that could be attracting the mice into her house, into her home. And the neighbor's response is your typical response you hear from a neighbor. Well, it's not my property. How many times you've heard this? And the reason why I titled the video the way I did is because she may have been, and I don't know, the video doesn't describe it, but the neighbor could have been a typical churchian. Alright, not a Christian, but a churchian. Someone who goes to the Sunday worship, someone who goes to Dead Religion Sunday, sits in the pew, and just absorbs what the pastor's saying and doesn't even act on it. Like be good to your neighbor. So she probably just goes to church and doesn't even care. Just your typical American churchian. So I don't know if that's the case or not, but if we take the law of averages, that could be possible. Also, I wanted to share something else too. Another reason why she should have listened to her neighbor about the rats is simply because if you have a brain, you'll know this is how pandemics start. Okay, possibly the rats could be carrying bubonic plague, from a flea or something, or hantavirus, which is something rats are very commonly carried. Now we know hantavirus is pretty hard to contact. It usually has to be direct contact between mice and a person, maybe through saliva or droppings or something like that. But you never know what kind of strain we're working with. It could be a different strain of hantavirus, one that's airborne because it's got more protein on the antigens or something. So it could be airborne. And so, like most diseases, there's obviously an incubation period. It could be 2, 3 days, a week, whatever. In the case of bubonic plague, I believe it's 2 to 4 days. So let's say it's bubonic plague, She could have been a school teacher. I mean, the show doesn't really express what she is. And she could have come in contact with a bunch of children. and could have been spreading bubonic plague because of the rat problem that she had. And so it's a lesson to everybody out here who's listening to this video that if your neighbor's expressing a problem, with infestation or something, and it might be because of what you're doing, like feeding these wild squirrels, maybe you should stop. Maybe you should stop and think for a moment that perhaps maybe that if you stop doing what you're doing, feeding squirrels or whatever nuts, that it could stop your infestation problem and potentially stop a pandemic. So you got to think about these things sometimes, okay? Stop being so selfish. I'm sorry, I'm just a little angry when I seen the video because it angers me that some people are so selfish like this. And she's probably a typical churchian too, which really makes me mad. I don't know that, but so anyway, what could happen, of course, is the virus could spread, or in the case of bubonic plague, the bacteria could spread. All these people get infected, because the incubation period is 2 to 4 days, so she could have infected many people, unknowingly and unwillingly. And all of a sudden you got this viral outbreak, or in the case of bubonic plague, this bacterial outbreak in the city. You got to quarantine this place. You have all this unnecessary healthcare costs, all this unnecessary resources that are being spent for this. People getting sick, people dying. Maybe it's spread to the county, maybe the state, and so on and so forth. All over one selfish act. One selfish act. If she would just listen and have a brain and just know that this is how pandemics start, then perhaps maybe this would not have happened. I'm not saying that a pandemic could start from this. It's just potentially that there's a good chance that a pandemic could start from something like this. So anyway, the story goes on. The lady eventually obviously says, well, it's not my property, your typical response, right? So what happened was she ended up calling the city, and the city, after 2 weeks, after she had to kind of live with the mice, or the rats, 2 weeks later the city shows up and demands and orders that the neighbors stop feeding the squirrels. But what really is terrible about the story, it's a real tragedy, is that the city had to get involved. The city. You know what I mean? We can't just be good to our neighbors. We have to have the city get involved. That's how ill our church is. That's how ill our people are in their thinking. So I hope you guys will look at this video and maybe just kind of, look at this video and learn from it. Because this is how things like pandemics are started. This is how it just takes one act of selfishness. Is all it takes. One act. And things can just blow up from there. So anyways, my name's Travis. Also, I go by Dragonor 2009. And I'm signing out. And leave a comment below. Thank you.